is how do I get the school to work with me and not fight with me about how to work with my son?
Oh, boy.
I'm sure you can talk about that one a long time, and I'm willing, and I'd love you to do it.
That's a great question. My son, I'm not sure how many people are familiar because if they've read my books or seen Jeremy on MTV, but my son is very much on the very impacted end of the spectrum. And so my fight has always been to try and have people believe that he is smart enough to learn something, and if they can't teach him, then it's because we haven't found the way to teach him. All this saying, by the way, that I had no idea how much my son really understood or not, but I wanted him to reach as his potential, whatever that may be. And so my way of dealing has always been more of a mediator, because that's kind of my background, having been raised in a French environment in America, and then having to be a social worker where you're trying to get what people need, but you have to do it in a way that's politically correct, and then moving to France where I worked with French and Americans, and they never understood each other, so I always tried to get everybody working together. I find myself doing the same thing in IEP meetings, and I also realized from my life experience work-wise that you get more with sugar than with vinegar.
Yes.
And I would always, you know that expression, you get more flies, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And
yes.
so I would always, what I would do is figure out the one or two things that would really make a difference in my son's education, and I would, arm myself with facts and figures, and I would always discuss things in a non-emotional manner.
Sure.
When it comes to IEP meetings, that's very important, because an IEP meeting basically is a business meeting, and you have to convince them, and you're not going to convince them just because your kid deserves this. It's really about why you think something would work for your child and how it has helped other people, and maybe you've tried it at home and it's worked. There's that. And also in the classrooms, I have found that sometimes you get aides or teachers that are really, very old-fashioned or just waiting to leave, but most of the people that I've had to deal with are people who, hey, they came into special education because they love kids, not because they're going to make $1 million. So the point is, how can you support them in seeing the light when it comes to your child? So one way I was able to do that was give them one or two little things that they could try with my son that would work, or show them what I did at home, because then they'd be amazed at how much more my son did at home than he did at school. So if I could get a home visit out of it, or a videotape, document. The other thing is that I would also find out what it is that the teacher needed in the classroom, because I soon found out that when you're in IEP meetings, my first experience when I moved back to the States with Jeremy at IEP meetings was the school district administrator would say, oh, yes, we can do that. Can't we, Mrs. Johnson? And they asked Mrs. Johnson, the teacher, couldn't she do this, this, and this? And, of course, she would have to say yes, because the school district administrator is her boss. But she did not have what she needed to follow through with my son. And so that I soon found out was like a trap. So what I would do is make friends with the teacher and find out what is it that you need in your classroom that's going to make you able to provide, the education my son needs. And then when I'd find out what that was, then I would go to IEP meetings and ask for these things, but leaving the teacher out of it, so they all thought it was for me, because the things that you have to realize is the parent has all the power. The teachers have no power. But you do have to be in a situation where people are going to listen, and I have been in situations where school administrators, no matter what you say, they're not going to listen, so I have ended up in due process. But I always start with trying to support the teacher and the aides, because they're the ones in the front line.